Hi, I'm Dr. Neal Barnard, and this is another episode of Awesome Vegans.
Oh my gosh, I have missed you. It has been a while, and we have breaking news. What a week this has been for news, and I couldn't have a better guest with me today. I'm Elysabeth Alfano on Awesome Vegans. I couldn't have a better guest to walk you through the news than Dr. Neal Barnard. Doctor, thank you for being here.
Great to be back.
Yes, great to be back. That's right, we were here about a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a press frenzy around meat being back on the plate. Tell us what it is.
Yeah, the Annals of Internal Medicine published some studies, and what really kind of rocked the world was they had a press release that went out that was picked up by the press, who I don't think they actually read the studies, but what they did report was meat is back. You don't have to reduce red meat or even processed meat like sausage for good health. And so some of the press was really kind of saying, don't worry, scientists must have been wrong all this time and so forth. But several things came out of this. First of all, there were 6 articles published in the Annals. 4 of them were meta-analyses. It's not new research. It's taking a new look at old research. And what they showed is that if you reduce meat, it does in fact reduce your risk of cancer. Reducing meat also reduces the risk of having a heart attack. Reducing meat also reduces the risk of diabetes and stroke. But then they published a 5th study that said, well, but meat eaters like eating meat. I'm not making this up.
Yeah, it couldn't be better than
I'm not making this up. So then the final of these articles said, okay, so reducing meat will reduce cancer risk and stroke risk and all these things, but if you like meat, maybe it's just not worth it. The reduction in cancer risk and heart disease risk isn't worth the fact that you'll miss meat. And that was it. Now, after that came out, frankly, every scientist in the world said, what are you talking about?
Yes.
People are already dumping meat. People are cutting back or eliminating all over the place. I mean, that's why there's a huge market for new veggie burgers and so forth, and new vegan restaurants on every other block.
Meatless Mondays.
Exactly.
Program.
People want us to do it. So they said, what are you talking about? People will change. But the other thing that then came out shortly after that is the New York Times did a piece and said, wait a minute, this is ringing a bell. The very same researcher, a Canadian researcher named Bradley Johnston, and the very same editor in the very same journal a few years ago did the very same release about sugar, saying sugar has no health issues whatsoever, don't worry about it. In effect, that was what the take-home message was. And they reported that the research was actually funded by McDonald's and other...
I hadn't heard that.
Oh yeah, it was funded by a group called ILSI, which is a huge consortium including McDonald's and soda manufacturers and everybody. And they had paid money to the people to do the sugar work. And so then when they got around to doing the meat work, they just left all that out and said, we're not going to disclose that. It was too long ago. Didn't affect us at all now. Anyway, I think where people are coming down to is that the meat industry, and sometimes people's tastes would like to say, there can't possibly be anything wrong with a double bacon cheeseburger, can there? However,
Fried in oil.
However, they are as unhealthy as they ever could be. And in fact, the new research even shows that cutting down is good, quitting even better.
May I give my woman on the street perspective on this?
Yes, please.
Okay, so first of all, you couldn't get more comedic than somebody saying basically, look, people are lazy. They don't feel like changing. Oh, so we're just not going to tell them because that would be inconvenient. So if you have a tooth that's rotting, oh, nobody likes to go to the dentist. So just let your mouth rot. That's okay. We're just not going to bother you. Okay, so that's just comedic. And then also what you're saying is there's actually no new research here. These are Bradley Johnston, or Johnston Bradley.
Bradley Johnston.
Bradley Johnston. He is a researcher, but anyone can make recommendations. That's what my takeaway was from this. Like, who is this person to make recommendations for the American public and Canadian public, actually, because he's Canadian? They have to pay the bills. They have to live with the pain. They have to live with the pills. So This is really, irresponsible, reckless, just to make recommendations that aren't based in fact.
Well, I think it's okay for him to submit his idea, if he wants to. I just don't think anybody's ever going to give up meat. I mean, if that's his idea, fair enough. But what I think was really irresponsible was the journal, I have to say. I hate to say it. We think about journals as being sort of even-handed and careful and scientific, but the Annals sent out a press release that said new guidelines, as if it was something from the government or whatever, And then it said, no need to cut down on red and processed meat for good health. And as you read through it, it's basically suggesting that this is sort of a done deal based on the very best science that there is. So the Physicians Committee actually went to the federal government, and we filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission because we said, according to federal law, that press release they sent around that was picked up constitutes advertising. And they were advertising this notion that is false, that if you just keep eating processed meat, that you'll have good health. And so that's been filed with the Federal Trade Commission. We'll see how far we get. Now, the FTC is not quick, but a number of years ago, the dairy industry had a series of ads. You might remember these. If you're trying to lose weight, and dairy is part of your diet, you'll lose more weight than if you are on a weight loss diet without the dairy. Well, the science behind that
is not there.
No, it's not there. So we went to the Federal Trade Commission at that time, and it took them 2 years. But they find that the FTC came in and said, pull the plug on those ads. That is not scientific. It's wrong. And the dairy industry dropped it. So that's where we are again.
I was sort of surprised that the journal put it out because I think it really makes them look bad. There are even some newspaper articles, certainly not the Wall Street Journal, which I was disappointed in. I thought you'd be more on top of your game, and same with the New York Times. But Reuters came out with a headline that said, meat, I'm paraphrasing, meat is back on the plate. This I'm not paraphrasing. If you choose to believe the study. Right. So even Reuters in the headlines, because anyone who chose to read what it actually said could see that it's not based in fact. So I was very surprised that the annals would do that to themselves.
I was surprised too, except for the fact that they did the very same thing about sugar. In 2016, they released it, and then it was in print the following year. And in 2014, do you remember Time Magazine? They had a cover story with that big swirl of butter. Remember that on Time? And it had the headline, Eat Butter. That was based on another Annals journal article that said saturated fat won't hurt you. You had thought that saturated fat might cause heart attacks or Alzheimer's.
And that was a forced retraction after that, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
They had, as soon as it was published, researchers at Harvard pointed out some serious flaws with the way they did their analysis. And they had to correct it, I think, more than once. So I don't know. Okay. Some people have suggested that journals are in competition with each other, that they want what's called an impact factor that's really high. And an impact factor has to do with how much attention people pay to what you're saying. Is this clickbait or is it something else? I'll let you decide. But from my standpoint, I was quite disappointed that they would characterize it that way.
This does such a disservice to the American consumer. I mean, the poor American consumer already has so many mixed messages coming their way. If you can't rely on journals such as this for accurate information, if they're fighting for clickbait or headlines then where does one get their accurate information? Obviously, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, but this is why I go back to saying it's irresponsible. Would you mind if I read a couple things from your notes? So
yeah, please do.
I do a lot of breaking news about plant-based studies and plant-based information and plant-based news, as we call it, celebs, everything all over the United States on radio and TV. So I've been talking about this just like Dr. Barnard has all week. And from the Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine, I'm just going to read some of the statistics of one of the studies that was in this compilation study. You decide for yourself if you think these numbers are significant to you as an individual. So if you reduce meat, correct me if I've got this wrong, if you reduce meat, there's a 13% lower risk of overall cause mortality, 14% reduction in cardiovascular mortality, 14% reduction in non-fatal stroke, 24% reduction in type 2 diabetes, 59% reduction in extrahepatic cancer, if I'm pronouncing that correctly,
that's it.
64% reduction in gallbladder cancer, 56% reduction in pancreatic cancer.
And that's just from reducing. That's not from eliminating. That's just if you reduce your meat intake a little bit, you can expect all of those benefits.
So if you see numbers like 63%, 64% reduction in gallbladder cancer, and yet the recommendation of this panel was to say, oh, that's not important. Honestly, I have to say shame. Shame on them and shame for the people who printed it. My last thing I'll say, if it's okay with Dr. Barnard, I will quote one of the, so you have these studies that were compiled and then these recommendations based on the older studies. One of the authors of the studies He did not know that they were putting these recommendations together. He was not alerted. When he found out that they were putting these recommendations together that were in fact contrary to the facts of his study, he had this to say: "I completely oppose this recommendation and worry about the lasting damage to public and planetary health."
Yes.
Yes.
What happened was they did these meta-analyses where they crunched the numbers. They found all the benefits that you said. There were 4 of them, and all of them were kind of similar: less cancer, less heart disease risk if you reduce meat consumption, and obviously even better if you quit entirely. But then it was the recommendations where they went crazy. They said, "But you like it too much. Continue eating it."
Don't inconvenience yourself. It's just a heart attack.
Well, where I'm especially concerned is with children, because you could say, well, our habits are strongly ingrained. The habits start over with each new generation. Each new child who starts school, if they're fed unhealthy foods, that's what they grow to like. But if they're fed healthful foods, they can have a very different life experience. So the idea that our culture is just a meaty culture and suck it up, from a medical standpoint, that makes no sense.
No, I would say that that's ridiculous. And case in point, Forbes just came out with an article that said 63% of millennials are working in more plants into their diet because they understand the correlation of more plants, less meat is better for their health.
Exactly.
And that's not even Gen Z. That's millennials. Yay, millennials. So I think we've put that one to rest. But very strange week in the news.
But this is going to happen again. Industry has a lot of money, and industry likes to find ways of disguising what they're doing as science. And so one day it's eggs have cholesterol, but it couldn't possibly hurt you. The next day it's cheese has fat, but don't worry about it. And now it's meat, don't worry about the heart attacks. It'll be something else. And it's rough for people to keep on top of things. So at pcrm.org, we'll try to have that good information for you.
Yes, I was just going to say the best thing you can do, because obviously your politicians do not have you in mind, you must advocate for yourself. Go to sources like PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. There's also, may I say?
Please.
Dr. Dean Ornish. It's okay. Dr. Greger.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yes,
yeah, Dr. Greger has Nutrition Facts.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
Plantrition Project. It's out there. It's out there. There's lots of doctors advocating for a plant-based diet. Please just look into it. Advocate for yourselves. This leads us to our next topic, which is the 2020 to 2025 USDA dietary guidelines. Those also may not have you in mind when they come out very soon. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, every 5 years, the government rethinks the guidelines. And this is really important. It sounds sterile, but it's actually what every kid in every school is going to be eating.
Huge.
Every kind of food assistance program. And the nutrition guidelines from every other country kind of take their drumbeat from what the American guidelines are. And so they get together a panel, and the panel will hear testimony from a lot of people, including industry, unfortunately. And then they fashion these guidelines, and they get hammered by what the chocolate manufacturers want and what the Dairy Council wants.
The salt people
The salt people, the Sugar Association,
Yes.
and the liquor industry, and of course the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the National Dairy Council. All these people are there encouraging that their products be front and center. But to their credit, I have to say that the guidelines have gotten better and better over the years. There are some kind of gaffes here and there, but for the most part, they've been bringing science to bear, and they've been promoting more plant-based diets pretty consistently.
Yes, with that in mind, just one little last note from our last conversation. I think the American Medical Association came out against that study, as did the American Cancer Society come out against, which I think is why you're seeing the USDA work in more plants, as they're realizing that really a plant-based diet is very much becoming a mainstream diet for healthy living now.
The American Medical Association actually passed a resolution it was maybe it might have been 2018, where the House of Delegates said that this dietary guidelines for Americans should make it clear that meat and dairy products are just optional. They're not this requirement that you got to have milk every day, you got to have meat every day. They want to make it clear that if you want it, that's up to you, but this is strictly an option.
And here's one more reason why you really want to get the facts for yourself and spend the time and look into these websites like Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. The USDA stands for the United States Department of Agriculture. It's a little bit of a conflict of interest. Within their marching orders, they have to promote agriculture, which is vegetables, but it's also meat and dairy. So just really look at the facts of how you can work in plants to your life to keep your cholesterol down, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, these things that are very expensive and very painful to live with.
Well, in the year 2000, when the guidelines were being revised, we used the Freedom of Information Act to get the CVs of every member of the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. And 6 of the 11 members had industry ties. I'm talking about financial ties, especially dairy, but some of the others. So we sued them. We sued the federal government, and we quickly won the lawsuit. And basically the court ruled that there are laws about how committees like this have to work, and they have to have balance. So you could have a dairy person on, you could have a meat person on if you wanted to, but they can't dominate the committee. Secondly, what they're looking at has to be transparently made available. It's not like we just came up with what the guidelines are. What's the evidence? And the court ruled the government didn't do that. And so since that time, they've been getting better and better and better, and they've brought some pretty good scientists on to devise these. There's still a lot of industry influence, but it's getting better.
Well, let's talk about some of that industry influence or misinfluence, if you will. I'm not saying that this is intentional, but it is a state of affairs for at least the advisory committee to the USDA Dietary Guidelines Committee. The advisory committee wasn't aware of, nor does it in its makeup represent the minority, which is now the majority if you put all the minorities together, minorities in the American population. So give us some of the stats about how Asian Americans and African Americans are lactose intolerant.
Yeah, this has actually been a peculiar story. Lactose intolerance means I have a glass of milk, and then the lactose sugar that's in the milk is something I can't digest. And it ferments in your digestive tract, and you get cramps and bloating and diarrhea. And it starts maybe around, sometimes as early as 6, 7 years of age. For some people, it starts a little bit later. But until the mid-1960s, it was thought to be uncommon. But that was when researchers started really testing all different groups. And what they found is that in whites, lactose intolerance was only about 15%. But in African Americans, it was about 70%. In Asians, 90%. Native Americans, in fact, every race other than whites, it was the rule. And so what they realized was, wait. It turns out that you should have the lactase enzymes that digest milk only up until the age of weaning, and then they go away. So anybody who drinks milk after the age of weaning is going to get sick. But about 15% of whites, that's still the case. The other 85% have a genetic mutation that they carry that keeps the enzymes in their digestive tract for a much longer period of time. So they don't get lactose intolerance, at least not so early. And apparently white people were making the rules. So they would say, the milk you should have is cow's milk. Here's the problem. This has gotten transformed into some pretty creepy laws. There is a law right now on the books that says, let's say a kid, 16-year-old kid, he's in high school. He's putting his tray on the lunch line and he's getting his choices for lunch. And the person behind the counter says, here's your cow's milk. They'll say, I can't have that. If I have that, I'm going to be in the bathroom all afternoon. I'm not making the debate club today. And he could say, well, do you have almond milk, soy milk, rice milk, anything?
Macadamia milk, cashew milk.
Any alternative. By federal law, the school cannot offer him an alternative to cow's milk unless he brings a note saying, from a parent or a physician, saying that he has a medical condition or a disability. Now, wait a minute. This is the absolute norm. The lactose intolerance is normal. It is not a disability. And to point out these kids and say you've got to prove that there's something wrong with you in order for us to give you a product that won't make you sick is crazy. Now, I want to sing the praises of the American Medical Association again. They passed a resolution saying that law's got to change. And they want to recognize the fact that people should be able to have foods that won't hurt them. And that's true if you're a person who's lactose intolerant or not. You should be able to have those alternatives.
Well, so what's interesting here is this isn't new science at all. It's been known since the 60s. But somehow the advisory committee seemed unaware of this. Help me understand that.
Well, also there's a heck of a lot of lobbying that goes on. The provision I mentioned now is a federal law. It's not just a guideline. This is a law. It's going to require congressional action to change. Good luck with that. But on the other hand, people are understanding that diversity is something that has to be taken seriously, and it's not as, I mean, frankly, there's no argument about it. We've just got to change these kinds of things.
I expect it to be bigger. I expect this to, so the media can be frivolous and reckless, or it can be right on point. Now, this would be a story that is a media's dream. Dietary guidelines, are they racist? Right. I think there are many groups that are going to come out against this. African American communities have always, I'm speaking just from my personal experience here, they've always told me that they can't handle dairy, that this makes them sick. And just for the average woman on the street here, man on the street, when you say lactose intolerance, you think like, if it doesn't affect you, you might think like, oh yeah, there's that thing out there. But this is what it means. Your nose is running. You often have trouble, not really breathing, but it's just, everything's labored, like you said, your stomach. I mean, these are things that really kind of stop your quality of life.
Well, here's what really concerns me the most. Let's say you're acceding to these rules. Okay, I'll just drink your darn milk, and they're pushing it on people. The group, well, researchers at Harvard looked at what are the causes of prostate cancer, which is an extremely common form of cancer in men, and dairy milk rose quickly up in the scientific data to be a major contributor. In the one Harvard study, the increased risk for big milk drinkers was 34% higher risk of prostate cancer compared to those men who tended to avoid milk. They did a follow-up study and found an even higher risk for men who tended to drink milk. And what we think is happening is that when the men drink milk, their bodies make more of something called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, that stimulates cancer growth. There are other reasons too. But here's the point. The group that is at the highest risk of prostate cancer is African American men. Why would you ever say, well, for an African American man, lactose intolerance is working for him? It's a good thing.
Oh,
it means I'm not going to drink milk.
Yes, right. And my body will thrive because of it.
My body will thrive as a result of it. If you decide, no, let's defeat that, you drink milk anyway, give it to your kids, you're setting up the risk for all the things that milk causes, including prostate cancer.
I just hear lawsuit. I mean, you know, if you've been a person who's been heavily marketed to something that is known to make you sick and they market it to you anyway, we are just going to see where this goes, people. But I expect this to be a media frenzy coming within the months. And I want to thank Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine and Switch for Good for bringing this to the attention of the USDA Advisory Committee. But of course, it's not just in men that there is higher prostate risk of cancer. Here we are in Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There are some correlations there between dairy and breast cancer. Is that not right?
There are a number of things. I have to say, the one that I'm most concerned about was a large study done here in California, where researchers looked at women who were battling breast cancer. They had already been diagnosed. They were already treated. If you're in that group, you've got one thing on your mind. Right. Is my cancer ever going to come back? What can I do to stop that from happening? And what they found was that those women who consumed the most high-fat dairy products, I'm talking about butter and cheese in particular, had a 49% increased risk of dying of their cancer compared to those cancer patients who ate those products very rarely or never. Now, what do you mean butter or cheese? I mean, how could that possibly relate to cancer? Well, butter comes from milk. Milk comes out of a cow. Cows make estrogens. The estrogens get into the milk, and when you take milk and transform it into cheese or butter, the estrogens go with the fat. Now, it's only a trace, but if you're having a trace of estrogen every time you butter your bread, or every time you have a cheese sandwich,
yes.
And Americans eat a lot of cheese, roughly 35 pounds of it a year. I'm talking about one person. That's a significant amount of estrogens. And even if it's only traces, we have evidence that it can be harmful. So when we looked at that 49% increased risk of dying of your cancer among the big cheese and butter eaters, we think that it's because of the estrogens that they're consuming. So our message is don't eat that stuff. There's a lot of evidence that when people follow a more plant-based diet, or hopefully a completely plant-based diet, they're going to do better.
Yes, this is very exciting news. All the diseases that you can reverse with a plant-based diet. So just more reason to be working in plants. And I'll do a shout out here. I do a lot of recipes. You can go to my website, ElysabethAlfano.com. I'm always on this channel doing cooking shows as well. And of course, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, they have recipes. So hit either of us up if you're looking for a way to start working the plants in. It sounds overwhelming at first, but there's 7-day Kickstarters, 21-day Kickstarters, 14-day Kickstarters, or just some recipes from time to time if you want to start with Meatless Mondays. There's a lot of opportunities to have fun in the kitchen and bring back good health for you and your family. Okay, so if people are heading away from dairy, and they are, here's some fun stats from the Good Food Institute. Plant-based yogurt is up 55%, plant-based ice cream is up 40%, plant-based creamer is up 62%. So right now, as this recent number thrown out at a conference was that the plant-based milks are 19% of the milk industry. Used to be 13, then it was 15. The most recent stat that I've heard, haven't seen the study, but I've heard the stat at the Good Food Institute conference is 19%.
Well, so, you can see it yourself. Go to the grocery store. It used to be that there was all cow's milk and the soy was a powder you had to like mix up. And you know, I mean, it's taking over a huge amount of market share, which is a good thing.
Yes, right. So, and that makes sense because we've just told you that 65% of all Americans and much higher in minority communities are lactose intolerant. So this is making sense. But if people are switching from dairy, they might be working in soy milk.
Okay.
So, oh my gosh, for once and for all, can we put to bed the soy argument? Is it good for you? Is it bad for you? I know the answer, but please.
Oh, I'm glad you raised that because a lot of folks have been confused about that. Let's walk through this. In 1931, researchers, I think it was 31, somewhere around there, researchers found that soy products contain what are called isoflavones. And the isoflavones, some of them like genistein is one, they seem to attach to the estrogen receptor in your body. So people thought, oh my goodness, what does that mean that if I consume tofu or soy milk, I'll get breast cancer? Or if I have breast cancer, will it progress? Or if I'm a man, will I get man boobs? I'm not making this up. This is what you'll read on the internet.
People tell me all the time, where do you get your protein and doesn't soy give you man boobs? Right. Those are the two things.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so it's not as if we haven't had time to look into this. And first of all, with regard to cancer, researchers have taken time to study this. And they've compared women who consume no soy at all to women who consume a lot of soy. In fact, the best comparisons are in Asian women and Asian American women because some of them consume huge amounts of miso and soy, tempeh products, tofu, large amounts. Some consume none. And what you find is amazing. Those women who consume the most soy products don't have more cancer risk. They actually have about 30% less risk of developing breast cancer. And then at least 5 studies have looked at women who had breast cancer already. And those women who consumed the most soy didn't have more progression. It was the opposite. They were about 30% less likely to have recurrence or to die of their cancer. So soy does seem to affect cancer risk. It reduces the risk of developing breast cancer, and it also reduces the risk of dying of it for people who have it. So back to the beginning. Wait a minute. If these isoflavones can attach to the estrogen receptor, what's going on? Well, think about this. In your car, you put your foot down in your car. What happens? You're going to say, my car goes? Well, wait a minute. You got more than one pedal in your car. What if your foot goes on the brake? Soy hits the brake, is what we believe, is that it actually reduces the likelihood of cancer developing and reduces the likelihood of cancer progression. Okay, man boobs?
Yes, I was going to say, is this true for men as well?
Yeah,
man boobs, please. We have to get into it.
Men can develop man boobs, but it's not from eating soy. Here's what it is. If a guy gains weight, which it can be from eating cheese and fatty stuff and meat, I don't need to tell you, the majority of American men are overweight in adulthood. Fat cells make estrogens. And so their belly fat or their fat, wherever it is, makes not something like estrogens, actual estrogens that then can cause the man boobs, which is not just body fat there, it's actually breast tissue. That came because Hank gained weight.
Okay, so here's the soundbite for, again, the person on the street. Whenever somebody asks me that, I always say, well, if you've seen any Asian men who live on soy, they don't have man boobs, and that's an entire continent. And they all are flat as can be. So
yes,
that doesn't make any sense.
Although I have to tell you, there's a tragedy happening now, both in Asia and here, and that is Westernization. Back in the 1980s, everybody in Japan was skinny, and they were eating huge amounts of rice and soy and so forth. Meat was, if used at all, it was a flavoring, little bits to flavor.
Dairy never.
Dairy, yeah, basically. I mean, this was not the ice cream culture. But as the fast food chains came in, dairy became big in the not big, but bigger in the Japanese diet, and meat came in. Breast cancer rates went way up, heart disease went way up, diabetes went way up. There's some suggestions of Alzheimer's and even other hormonal conditions like hair loss in men where there's something changing in regard to their body chemistry. All of these things are starting to crop up in Japan, but they're frankly paralleling the same changes in China, throughout Asia, and even here. When you look at each generation is eating more cheese than the generation before it. We're getting heavy earlier. We're seeing diabetes earlier, heart disease earlier, all of these problems.
So I just want to go back to a point that I said before. You must advocate for yourself. Why is dairy going to a continent where people historically have never eaten dairy and they are lactose intolerant? Because Coca-Cola has made a marketing push in Asia. It's as simple as that. The power of industry, despite your health and even intentionally perhaps contrary to your health. You must advocate for yourselves. Thank you, Internet, for making that even possible.
Exactly.
Okay, but you mentioned something in there, hormones. Let's get into it because I'm not sure people think about the relationship between hormones and diet, and I'd love to know more.
You know, people think about food.
New book, by the way. So
this is an amazing thing. People think about foods that could affect your weight or could affect your heart or affect cancer risk. But there's a whole new aspect about this, and that's how foods can affect your hormones. And this started with a phone call. I was sitting at my desk, phone rang, and it was a young woman who said, Dr. Barnard, my mom told me I had to call you. I said, what's the problem? She said, I can't get out of bed. A lot of women have menstrual cramps, but for some, they're off the scale. And for this young woman, that was her issue. She said, every month, there's one day like this where I can't function. And I said, well, how about, let me give you some painkillers for a couple of days so you can function. But as she was talking, I started thinking about the role of food. And it turns out that menstrual cramps are caused by having a little bit too much estrogen, female sex hormones, in your blood. That thickens the lining of the uterus a little too much. And at the end of the month, that lining of the uterus disintegrates, and it releases maladjusted chemicals called prostaglandins. They cause cramps. So I thought, okay, how can we bring down our estrogens? I said, how about this? To the caller. For the next 4 weeks, no animal products at all. Keep oils to a bare minimum, foods as natural as possible, and see how it goes. She called me back 4 weeks later and said, this is amazing. My period arrived, 0 symptoms. And she noticed that every month after that, she was fine, except when she started to kind of go back to her previous diet, and then the pain would kick in. So that was one person. So I was taken by that, and I did a research study with our colleagues at Georgetown University. We brought in a large group of women. They all had moderate to severe, what we call dysmenorrhea or cramps. And what we found is that a low-fat vegan diet makes the pain shorter in duration, doesn't last as long, but less in intensity on average. So for some women, the effect was enormous, others not so much, but on average it was much more manageable. But even before their periods arrived, the women would say, I'm feeling different physically. The bloating and water retention greatly reduced, and also mood changes reduced as well. So the point being that, yes, you can go to the store and you can buy lots and lots of painkillers and take fistfuls of them. Doctors can prescribe hormonal treatments for you. But if the cause is on our plate, that's a great thing to address.
So we've talked about this before on this show. It is very expensive to be sick. Doctor's visits, tests, pills, not to mention the inconvenience, and it's just a life of pain. So if you can fix it 3 times a day, all the power is on your plate. This book is coming out in February. Do I have that right?
Yep, it's Your Body in Balance, coming out in February.
Your Body in Balance by Dr. Neal Barnard, Hormones, Health, and the Science of Food. So that's wonderful.
There's one other piece of this. Let me mention, if you don't mind. We talked about the pain that people go through. In this study that I was describing, where we brought in women with menstrual cramps, we asked all the participants to not use any kind of hormonal medications during the trial, because that would be a confounder. And so that included birth control pills. If they were sexually active, we said, please use some kind of contraception other than birth control pills, because those hormones will goof up our study. One of the women said, don't worry about me. My husband and I haven't used any kind of contraception for years because she said, I'm infertile. I don't ovulate. The second month of the study, when she'd been on the vegan diet for 2 months, she came into our center and she said, I got good news and I got bad news. I said, what is it? She said, I've got to drop out of your study because I'm pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So,
oh my gosh, I love that story.
The point being, this is a true story. The point being, she had changed her diet, her hormones got into better balance, and this whole idea of I'm infertile, there's nothing I can do, and you know what this is like. People spend huge amounts of money.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And they get all kinds of treatments, and they're monitoring themselves, and they're turning natural reproduction into this sterile exercise. Anyway, I about 8 years later, I was lecturing in a different city, and she came to my lecture with her 3 kids. And it's astounding to think what can happen. I've also told the story about Catherine Lawrence, who you may know. Catherine Lawrence is one of our Food for Life instructors. And Catherine Lawrence first walked into this because she was an aerospace engineer. And she was in Iraq. And she came back to the US. And when she got back, her friends basically said, what foods did you miss while you were in Iraq? Over in Iraq, you don't get any of your normal favorites. And she said, you know what I miss? I miss cheese. Macaroni and cheese and so on. She tucked into cheese like crazy. Cheese snacks, those mac and cheese dinners. She gained weight, but she also started to develop pain in her abdomen, especially with her cycle. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse. The doctor did a laparoscopy, which is you look into the abdomen through a little hole. And so the doctor made a little slit in her abdomen and looked around, and he sewed her up, sent her to the recovery room, and wrote down in the chart endometriosis. Endometriosis is a condition where the cells that line the uterus have sneaked out, and they're implanting all around your abdomen, and they swell up and they hurt. And they also will strangle the fallopian tubes, so you get infertility as a result. And this is what she had. And so the doctor tried various hormonal treatments and painkillers, but nothing was working for her. And she was getting worse and worse. She decided, okay, even though she and her husband hadn't started their family yet, she was going to have a hysterectomy.
Oh my gosh.
So they scheduled the hysterectomy.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, if you just take out all the organs, they don't hurt anymore.
Oh my gosh.
But something happened. A friend of hers said, wait, try a diet change. Because we know this from breast cancer, that breast cancer patients change their diets to tackle their hormones, and it can help. She thought, what have I got to lose? She went on a completely low-fat, vegan, no animal products diet. And she started to lose weight, and her energy got better, but also her pain started to diminish. And it went down and down and down and down and down. And so her doctor did another laparoscopy, brought her into the operating room, made a little incision, started looking around her abdomen and looking around and looking around. And then he sewed her up and sent her into the recovery room. And the doctor went out to the waiting room and said to her husband, this is amazing. Her endometriosis is effectively gone. And her husband said, I'm not surprised. She went completely vegan, low fat, really totally healthy, and she's felt dramatically better ever since. And the doctor said, no. Foods don't cause endometriosis. And there is no way that a diet change could make it go away. The only possible explanation here is this is a miracle. So,
I love it when someone of science says, I don't have the science, so I'll call it a miracle.
Can you believe it? Anyway, Catherine has 3 kids now.
Oh my gosh.
No, she never had the procedure. Her endometriosis went away. She's got 3 kids. And she joined us to be one of our Food for Life instructors. But my point is, here's my point. Yes, you could change your diet to be kind to animals. That's a really good thing. to help the earth. That's a great thing. To reduce your weight or to prevent heart attacks or these kinds of things, that's all great. But if just from day to day you just don't feel good,
you can't do anything.
Yes, now is the time to use all these diet changes that nobody ever talked about before. This is going beyond cutting your cholesterol and that kind of thing. It's tackling those hormones that are affecting everything from your pain to how you feel, to your fertility, to your moods, your thyroid function. All of these things are part of this spider's web of hormones where you pull on one strand, it affects everything else. And I want to show you in your body in balance how to choose the foods to get back to the life that you want.
So this book, Your Body in Balance, The New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health, this is just a work in progress copy, but the real thing is going to be out February 1st.
February 4th.
February 4th. So that's when this podcast is going to be out on iTunes and WGN Radio and Vegan Magazine and my site, ElysabethAlfano.com. So we'll be letting you know February 4th when this hits the stands and Amazon.com, of course. The good news about this, if you feel overwhelmed at all, the good news about this is that this actually empowers you. So I know in first stance it might seem like, oh my gosh, now this is one more thing I have to tackle and my diet for hormones, and I was doing it for heart before, and now there's just so much going on and the misinformation, and how do I take it all in? The good news is that you don't have to go to school and study. You don't have to stop your life. You don't have to go to Washington, D.C. and advocate on the mall. You can do all of this from the internet in your home. Hit me up for recipes. Hit up Dr. Barnard for recipes. You can very quickly change your life, and you control it all. Not the marketers, not the government. You can quickly empower yourself by just changing your diet. You'll feel so much better on so many different levels.
It's remarkably easy to do. Nobody's going to tell you to cut calories or avoid carbs or do a ketogenic this or that. You don't have to do any of those things. It's simply a question of looking at the foods that you choose and letting them gently readjust your body chemistry in a good way. The other benefit of it, it's fast. I'm not talking about 8 weeks to wellness. I'm talking about things that you're going to feel right away. So
you're going to feel better in like 4 days, and you're going to see dramatic changes in your weight and your numbers if you're looking at those on a monthly basis in like 3 weeks.
Yes, and you'll discover that all the things will fit in sync with other things in your life. If you wanted to get your cholesterol down, if you wanted to lose some pounds, the same foods that will readjust your hormones will also help you with those things too.
So I have a quick question on hormones, and then I'm going to get to my end quiz of the interview. My last question on hormones is, so you're talking about women who haven't hit menopause for the most part,
right.
But some of my girlfriends are saying things like, my mood swings are off the charts, and I don't feel like myself, and I'm going crazy, and right. Any hints about how to help those things?
Hints, yes. I don't think we have the definitive answers, but I'll tell you a couple of things. The first was, we drew a lesson from Japan. We were talking earlier about how Japan had been westernizing, and as cheese and meat came in, they started having a lot of health issues. One of the health issues that they developed was menopausal symptoms. There was no Japanese word for hot flashes. They didn't have it very much. And when gynecologists would talk to women about what did you experience as you went through the change, they would say, oh, my shoulders hurt a little bit, but it wasn't like massive hot flashes happening all the time. And so what we think is happening, this is a theory, but there's a lot of evidence behind it, is that when women have had a past time in their life when they were eating meat and dairy and things, their body kind of reset such that when the menopause hits, the change in hormones will hit them harder than it would have had they not had that dietary history. That's the first thing. So
let me make sure I understand that. If you're eating meat and dairy, it's going to hit you harder. Is that what you're saying?
That's the theory, yes.
Okay, theory.
Yes, but it does seem to be the case. The other thing is that researchers, I mentioned earlier about how soy having not a harmful effect, but actually a beneficial effect on hormonal changes. This doesn't affect everybody, but we found roughly about 40% or so of women discovered that if they have soy products, they can reduce their hot flashes. It has to be a fairly substantial amount of soy, but apparently it's the isoflavones that seem to have that beneficial effect in addition to a breast cancer reducing effect. So all I can say is give it a try and see what happens. A word of reassurance is that hot flashes do stop eventually. That may not sound very reassuring if you're having them right now, but this too will pass. But it does look like a healthier diet might help. It's a good idea to lace up your sneakers too. Regular exercise will help as well.
Okay. Noted. Okay, I'll keep you guys posted on that as we get more and more information. And as this book comes out February 4th, Your Body in Balance, The New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health by Dr. Barnard. Okay.
Oh, wait. I gotta say one other quick
go
thing.
ahead. Yeah.
Really quickly. I knew I had to put recipes in this book because I'm the doctor guy.
Okay, but can I just say one thing before he says he's got recipes? I make a super mean lasagna. I'm just saying, no meat, no dairy. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, excellent. And so when I was putting this together, I worked with my friend Lindsay Nixon, who made a really great set of recipes for this. And she sent me the recipes. I said, wow, Lindsay, these are great. She said, wait, you don't understand. There's something else. And she told me, I've included this in Your Body in Balance. She said, you didn't know this when we started working together, but she herself had terrible cramps and a cycle that was just really punishing her. But she found that a diet change worked for her too. So I hope it works for you.
Okay, awesome. I love that. Basically, it's one-stop shop. A diet change can change your entire life and save money because it's very expensive to be sick. Okay, exit interview. What's your favorite snack?
My favorite, I tell you, I grew up in North Dakota. And in North Dakota, you eat roast beef or pork chops. And the only vegetable we have was green beans.
And that's your favorite snack?
No. Oh, what I'm saying is, that's my background. Okay. So what I'm saying is there's certain things that I never had. And what I have become addicted to are things that I never had as a kid growing up in Fargo. And that's the two things, mangoes and papayas. Oh. I have become so completely addicted to them. And when we're off the air, I need you to tell me how to tell when a papaya is ripe, because I always get it wrong. I cut it either too soon or too late. I think I figured out the mango. But my big favorites now are mangoes and papayas. And to me, they are just candy.
Yes, they are. I'm sending you to Tahiti. That's the gig for you. Okay, what are we always going to find in your fridge?
In my fridge, well, the mangoes and papayas are outside of it. In my fridge, I always have lots of green leafy vegetables, the cruciferous vegetables,
of course you do.
Like broccoli. And I often have frozen broccoli. Now my fresh food friends will say, wait a minute, you got frozen? That's terrible. Well, the reason is I travel all the time. And if I buy a lot of fresh broccoli, when I get back home, it's all like rubber. So I get the frozen ones and it's in my freezer and it's ready when I am.
I'll just do a shout out, no GMO organic when you can, people. I think that's always a good thing.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, soy as well. Really try to look for that organic soy. Because we're talking about soy and how great that can be for you.
Yes.
Okay, you do travel a lot. You're super busy. You come home late from the airport. You walk through the door. What's the one meal you can make in 10 minutes? It's always good. It's your go-to.
That's a great one. Well, for me, there's always 4 food groups. And so there's grains and beans, which to me, those two are kind of for earlier in the day, not for really late usually.
Really?
So vegetables and fruits for me are my more light kinds of things. So if it's super late, I'm just going to have something rather modest. So I'll have I'll have some kind of fruit dish, and then I hit the hay. But I want to tell you, I also have a rule, which is I don't stay up. I'm not one of these stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning guys. 10 o'clock, my light is out.
Okay. Okay, I'll try to.
So my foods are light,
yes,
going in there
before you go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
I do go to bed late, but I try to eat early. I try to go to bed sort of on an empty stomach, or at least mildly empty stomach. I don't like to go to bed with a lot of food in my stomach. Yucko. Okay, is there one phrase that you live by? So you're having a bad day, you're up against the USDA, you've been going at it with the FTC. Maybe it didn't go your way. What do you tell yourself to get you through?
Oh, I don't worry about these things at all. First of all, we have to do this. I mean, let's face it. If people make healthy dietary changes, it affects you, it affects your family and your people future around you, it affects the planet that we live on, it affects all of the animals that we're sharing this with. We've got to behave decently because we want to take care of ourselves and all these other folks too. So I don't worry about these things. My feeling is we've got to just push hard and win. The stakes are too high. But if I needed to cheer myself up, I would use 2 words. We are winning. That might be 3 words. Are we not winning? Years ago, if you talked about I'm following a vegan diet, people would say, "What is that?"
Yes,
or they would pronounce it vegan or something like that. People have got that idea now. Everybody knows somebody who's doing it. They might be doing it themselves. You look in the stores, all the products that are out there, all the books, all the online materials. We are clearly winning this. Now, we're not winning fast enough because there are a lot of folks who still haven't got the message. So we are winning, but we got to make noise. And that's why I'm grateful to you for what you do, because you make such good healing noise to really get people pumped up and excited. And that's the coolest thing of all.
Okay, well, I do have to say, I do a lot of radio and TV interviews across the nation, bringing the plant-based news. It might be celeb news, it might be health news, just whatever there is to talk about. So because of this last week of all the news that was going down on meat, a very interesting interview popped up. Usually people ask me to come on for information, but this was a shock jock kind of interview.
Right.
You know, a radio interview where all people do is scream and there's like bells and whistles and, you know, Halloween costumes everywhere and stuff. So this person who's meat and cigars like in the radio station, I got him to eat a Beyond Meat sausage and he was all over it. But that just tells you, when you're saying everyone's got the word, this kind of interviewer, meat all the way, he asked me to come to his studio and bring in plant-based burgers because he was going to give it a try, and we had a really good conversation about it. So you never know. It's changing.
It's changing, and it's changing fast.
Yes, right. Okay. So my next question for you is, what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Wow, just about everything. I really, I'll tell you. I have to say, when I was in medical school, I honestly thought that diet changes were, helpful, but not dramatic.
Groundbreaking.
Right? No, yeah, exactly. Not groundbreaking, not dramatic. And I really wish I had recognized the power of this before. And once you learn that power and you put it to work, you experience it in your own life, and you see this is fantastic in every possible way. And of course, with the athletes now and the Game Changers movie that's come out, which is wonderful, people are realizing that this is a way to put real serious power to work.
Yes, absolutely. I think what I would say about that is that people do change. People do change. People can change. Change is possible. I'm guessing none of you took a horse and carriage today to get where you wanted to go. I'm guessing you did something like a car on a road. Those are things we all had to do, change dramatically. Our entire society, all the infrastructure had to change for that, not to mention jobs and factories and no more horse and carriage. So things do change. People do change their ways, and change is possible. Change is within your grasp, and you are empowered to do so. Okay, I think that's over and out for us. We've had a lot of information today. February 4th, people, Your Body in Balance, The New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health by Dr. Neal Barnard. And of course, just hit either of us up if you want recipes, 21-day Kickstarters. I've got meatballs, I've got chili, I've got tacos. I mean, you've got fabulous recipes, of course, salads and bowls and stuff. I've got desserts, so hit us up. We've got the recipes. You've got the knowledge now because of Dr. Barnard, and that's going to get you on your way to a beautiful Sunday. Dr. Barnard, thanks for being with me.
Thank you. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, always great to see you again. And everybody, thanks for being with us.
Thanks,
Dr. Neal Barnard is the bomb. Bye, everybody.